A star far from our own. A planet, one of 12, similar in size to Earth but devoid of life. Little more really than a giant rock. And on its surface, a being. A stranger. A fugitive. This is our introductory narrative to Warlock, who is one of the most quirky and interesting members of the New Mutants. Welcome back to my series focused on tracking the ideological evolution of the characters during Chris Claremont's original run on the New Mutants. Today we're going to be discussing the resident alien member of the team, and that is, of course, Warlock. Before we move forward and explore his growth throughout this run, let's first establish his base powers and then give some context to his background. Warlock is a member of a techno-organic alien race known as the Technarchy, and with that his abilities include a form of mechanical shape-shifting, and he himself doesn't necessarily even have a true shape, but is instead ever-shifting, which is portrayed wonderfully by the extremely talented Bill Sienkiewicz, and his artwork acts as a way to further emphasize the abstract nature of the character. Along with that, the way that Warlock's alien race sustains themselves is by inflicting organic material, such as people, animals, or plants, with a techno-organic virus, and then after having converted it, absorbing the energy source from that being. This somewhat ties into the very foreign and seemingly harsh culture of these aliens, and we'll talk more about that later, but for now it's also important to know that Warlock is not a mutant in the same way that the rest of the team are mutants. He doesn't explicitly have an X gene. He's instead considered a mutant among his people, specifically because he objects to the violent and warlike ways of them, and instead innately has empathetic tendencies that grow even more and are explored further during this run. Now, I'd like to begin with Warlock's first encounter with our New Mutants, which occurs in the New Mutants issue 21, which is the Slumber Party issue. Following the events of the Demon Bear storyline, which took a toll on our young cast, the girls of the New Mutants are hosting a slumber party at the mansion, refocusing the book on a more traditional struggle of adolescence, while Sam and Bobby are getting some bonding time in while swimming nearby. However, the story quickly is infiltrated with horror and sci-fi elements that were very common to the New Mutants around this time, as Warlock, in the form of a meteor, is hurling towards the planet Earth and is going to end up right at the Xavier Institute. But the reason Warlock is desperately fleeing through space and towards Earth is the result of an interesting theme that seems to pop up quite frequently in Claremont's work, and that is a parental issue. We've seen several instances of mutants rejecting their parental desires, such as was the case with Mystique and Rogue, or even Bobby and his father in the New Mutants. But with Warlock, he's fleeing because he's rejected the entire parental dynamic system that his race operates from, which is a cycle of patricide. A father must fight their child for the child to prove they're strong and worthy of life, or alternatively, if they're defeated, that would indicate, from the perspective of this species, that an individual was not a worthy offspring. Magus, who is Warlock's father, is a parental villain specific to Warlock, of course, but also an extension and representation of the threat that his species poses. So, as Warlock flees this conflict and races towards Earth, Magus too follows, willing to burn down anything in his path and anyone in his path, and he's not too far behind. This dejection also sets up another common theme in these books, and that is found family. And Warlock eventually becomes a member of the team and the New Mutants family, but his initial encounter with them was quite rocky, as from his interstellar trip, he's left depleted of energy and is in an agitated state looking for something to consume in an effort for survival, but he ends up going toe-to-toe with several members of the New Mutants, like Magic, where he infects one of her demons of Limbo with the techno-organic virus, and then he's also attacked by Amara, Bobby, Sam, and even Danny, who's currently in a wheelchair recovering from the events of the last storyline. She brings out his greatest fear, which is his father, Magus. Warlock's reaction to the continued attacks from the New Mutants team also function to demonstrate a difference between him and the rest of his alien race. He doesn't want to hurt them and even rationalizes in his own head that they're only attacking him out of fright and defensiveness of him intruding into their space. Eventually, Rain takes a leap of faith, metaphorically and in a way physically, as she opens herself up to Warlock, who she's able to notice is clearly in a pained state, and that opens the floodgates for the team to begin communicating with Warlock with the help of Doug Ramsey, who we'll also talk about more in in a bit since his relationship with Warlock is one of the most enduring friendships in comics. So the team learns about Warlock's plight and essentially his status as a rejected galactic refugee. Warlock also, now recharged with energy, is able to articulate himself in his own unique way, and what we learn from this character is while he's inherently abstract in nature and somewhat aligning with fears associated from body horror, he's actually very gentle in heart and soul, an empathetic, emotionally intelligent alien being disgraced from his culture, entering a new culture that he doesn't really know anything about. Yet the demeanor that he presents is aligned more with what it means to be human. He's got an almost innocent purity that fits better within human morality, or at least the best of what we can expect from human morality. Warlock is essentially a mix of a few well-known alien tropes, like the character being a fish out of water and interacting with our world from a different perspective, often in comical to us ways, being monstrous in appearance but benevolent in action, and even the way he was mistaken for a meteor is fairly common in alien-related media. This is not a critique, the use of tropes is not a bad thing at all, and I feel like Claremont, heavily aided by the artwork of Sienkiewicz, pulls this character off exceptionally well. And so what starts in Warlock's initial journey as a rejection and escape from his father figure ends in this issue with the acceptance of a new father figure in the form of Charles Xavier, as the students all vouch for the character of Warlock, who is then welcomed and officially joins the team. But this is just the start of the paradigm shift that is his new life. He's still going to have many challenges he has to face, he's going to have to learn how to operate in this new world, and he's going to have to learn about and accept team dynamics. After this, Warlock tags along with the team as they move from conflict to conflict, all while supporting in any way he can, but also learning from them the best practices for operating in this world and also cultivating relationships with the team members. He does get confused pretty often, but he seems to recognize that he is new here and should defer to the judgment and advice of the New Mutants or Charles Xavier. And Warlock becomes very defensive of his new friends in a way that I've noticed is pretty starkly different than the rest of the team. Anytime he sees one of them in imminent danger or take a heavy blow, it's almost as if he's extremely pained to see it, like there's an empathic connection with them because he's grown to care so much for them. This is probably due in part to the expressive nature of the character, but he even says at one point he'd rather die than have his friends hurt, which is also something that I think makes him very likable to the reader. He's not exactly perfect in this regard though, as I mentioned he can get confused by the pace of things on Earth at times, like for example when other members of the team are being possessed by the Shadow King to attack him, he starts using the term once friend, as in you were once a friend, instead of his usual term self-friend, which just means his friend, and he also gets pretty angry from these attacks. Along with that, he also becomes very distraught and thrown off by Limbo when magic takes him there. He even flips on magic really, although Sim, one of the demons of Limbo, is more responsible for sowing the seeds of that, and such is the tragedy of being so innocent and pure. Those types are usually more susceptible to manipulation, and this is a hurdle and nuance of our world Warlock has to come to terms with. And as he's facing off against magic, eventually Warlock has a crisis of self and discorporates, but with a pep talk from magic, he realizes he was wrong about her and he's got a lot to learn about the way things work, and then magic, as a strategic plan but also as a way to boost Warlock's confidence, gives him the opportunity to play a key hero role in saving their teammate Karma from the Shadow King, which ends up working out in their favor. And on the subject of friends and the relationships in the book, now is probably a good time to talk about Warlock's relationship with Doug, who are two characters who quickly become the best of friends. So because of Doug's mutant ability to be able to understand and decipher any language, him and Warlock already foundationally had a better path for communication than the rest of the team. And so, in a way, Warlock looked up to Doug, and Doug kind of became his mentor for learning about life on Earth. And in return, one of the things that Doug is most self-conscious about as a character during this run is his inability to contribute to the team in a meaningful way during fights that are more combative. So to protect Doug and also give him an extra edge, something that Warlock does often is synergize with Doug in a variety of ways. This can manifest itself in Warlock becoming armor for Doug during a fight or anything similar to that. And as a result, that level of bonding cements their friendship even further. It's basically just another way the two can be in sync with each other. A good story that shows the scope of that relationship is the Asgardian War storyline, again, where they all get separated from each other, and this is one of the first times in a while we see Warlock separated and him acting independently with his newfound knowledge of how to operate around living organisms and in this world and whatnot. And he immediately does run into a bit of conflict as he needs to feed and there's a hostile dragon-like enemy attacking him, but Dani had told him not to feed on large living organisms without her permission. Warlock in this case does it anyway since she's not around to ask, and he's starving and he's also in danger. But his line of thinking indicates that he is doing his very best to assimilate in certain ways to human culture and to keep his friends proud of him, which is a very noble attribute of the character. But what I specifically wanted to talk about here is what Warlock does after that, because he goes and he immediately tries to seek out Doug to make sure he's safe. And when they do meet up again, of course they're thrilled to see each other and they're thrilled to see that the other one is safe. And then in an upcoming instance of combat, they again synergize together to work as a team to fight. And this gives both Doug and Warlock a sense of purpose and subsequent happiness from that. These two characters really work off each other and are there for each other even more than the rest of the team. Their dynamic has ascended the familial relationship that the whole team shares. They're both willing to sacrifice themselves for the other, and at one point Doug even lets a dying Warlock infect him and feed off some of his life energy to keep himself alive. I'd also like to bring up the resurrection of Cypher issue here briefly. It is post Claremont, but I think he'd at least sent some plot beat directions for the subsequent issues after he left to Louise Simonson. But when Doug dies, Warlock is also willing to do what he can to bring him back to life, even stealing the corpse to do so. Now that doesn't work out obviously, and Warlock really is just puppeteering a dead body, but it's a way to show how important they were to each other, and in that instance Warlock also learns another lesson, this one painful, about what it means to be human. But let's pivot back to the greatest and most imminent challenge that Warlock has to overcome, and that is his father, Magus. The threat of his father is a great source of trauma and fear for Warlock, not only for himself now, but for the worry that his father could kill his new friends and the only people who have ever welcomed him unconditionally. And we see Warlock really freaking out about this at the end of issue 46, when Magus has finally pinpointed his location. His fear is even so strong that it overrides Dani's psychic shields and triggers her powers. Luckily, they quickly flee as Warlock did originally, but this time thanks to magic teleporting them away to Limbo. But as a testament to his nature, Warlock urges the team to leave him so Magus can just destroy him and then spare them and the Earth. However, Magus quickly finds them in Limbo and begins infecting the place with the transmode virus, and the whole team is seemingly ready to stand up and defend Warlock, which is something we've seen before in this book, the group standing up against the abusive authority figure of one of the New Mutants, for example when they all confronted the Reverend that persecuted Reign her whole life. In this case though, there's a bit more physical conflict involved, of course, and more risk due to the power of Magus, and the team ends up having to flee again. We also get illustrated a great example of how Warlock truly is absorbing the knowledge and the spirit of the team, as eventually they need to go back and check Limbo to see if Magus is still there and infecting it, but that is a very dangerous task which Magic says she has to do since it's her domain, but Warlock shuts that down and volunteers himself instead, noting how he observed Bobby overcome his fear of Limbo and Warlock's own transmode virus to fight for his friends and for the good of the team. In turn, Warlock's willing to do the same thing for them, even if it might lead to his doom. This isn't the final confrontation with Magus yet though, since the coast is clear and Warlock returns unscathed. They're then on the run for a while, but the epic culmination of Magus versus Warlock of this run comes to head in issue number 50, where Warlock comes to terms with the fact that action must be taken aside from running or the conflict will never end and him and his friends will always be in danger. Warlock's first instinct is to just surrender, but Doug makes sure Warlock knows that that is not an option, and instead the team bands together for their friend and they fight Magus as a family. And this helps Warlock break out of his coward shell when it comes to his father and finally face him head on. It's a great visual moment of bravery and defiance in the face of the futile, but the futile, it seems, may have an upper hand as Warlock is quickly struck down. Luckily, Binary is nearby to give him energy back, and Warlock is up and at it again, ready for round 2, this time with everyone basically creating a mutant circuit with their powers to affect Magus. But Warlock is boosted most of all by merging with Doug Doug a soul merge as they utilize both their abilities to scan Magus and find out what makes him tick within his coding. And eventually they figure it out and together are able to severely damage Magus. As Doug explains, they didn't want to kill Magus, but instead rewrote his code in a way that transports him back to his home planet and reverts him to a baby, basically postponing the issue for a long time while giving Warlock time to grow up and the team to become closer and get better at functioning together. And it's kind of beautiful that Doug and Warlock are able to do this together, and this was another way in which their eternal bond of being soul friends was solidified. We also see the bookend of Warlock's arc here as he thanks the team and Professor Xavier for teaching him so much and supporting him through it all, noting that while Magus may be his biological father, he sees Professor Xavier as his real father, and it's a very touching little moment. We saw Warlock as a good soul but a complete stranger and loner to our world, find his family, be uplifted by them, shed his cowardice thanks to the confidence and support they've given him, and he becomes this light-hearted, kind-souled powerhouse of the team that is ready to defend his friends whenever the call is put out. He's got a lot more to learn at this point about Earth and humanity and his role here, but after this run, he's definitely been set on the right path for further growth and development. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and this deep look into Warlock during Claremont's run on the New Mutants. If you did like it, I would appreciate it if you left a comment below letting me know you enjoyed the video. And if you're new here, I would ask you to subscribe to this channel so you can be updated on when I put out new videos. This is part of a video series that I'm doing on the New Mutants, and there are still more characters to go. With that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for watching.